talking about these austerity measures, I'd like you to take about a minute or so to explain what these austerity measures are. What are some of the standard prescriptions that are administered by the IMF as a condition for getting IMF support in getting credit on the international market or receiving an IMF bailout?
Right. Well, it changes in circumstances and is often dependent on particular loans or agreements made with countries. And sometimes, those agreements that are made are not public. So one of the issues that we've had to deal with at Jubilee USA, as well as among many of our partner organizations, is trying to, find, what's happening. Historically, it's been very clear that, in order to get loans, there have been austerity measures that have been suggested or agreed upon in order to, save money in that country. For example, when the economic crisis was at its hardest point here in the United States, and the U.S. government was spending more money, as well as other wealthy countries were, in order to keep people employed and to increase benefits. What the IMF was saying to the developing world, at this point you need to tighten your belts, and you need to make cuts in order to maintain your ability to have credit and take out loans.
So that while we were spending, actually borrowing money to spend in public programs through the stimulus package, countries which are receiving the assistance or which are seeking assistance from the IMF are told to go in exactly the opposite direction, which is to reduce their public spending. Do I get this right?
Well, that's exactly right, and it's just startling because it defies the logic that I think so many of us understood, under the financial crisis. And what we've been able to point to is that, there are very clear examples of how this has happened and how this has taken place in recent years. This past October, Jubilee USA, we're a network of 75 religious, labor, relief, and human rights groups. Our membership includes all the mainline churches, the AFL-CIO, essentially because of the bold politics that we move forward in terms of working for economic justice, we still have one of the accolades of being one of the last bipartisan coalitions on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. And so we released a report this past October, really looking at, how is the IMF still going forward with these austerity measures? How is it still using conditions? How is it impacting the world's poorest? And what we found is that, these policies essentially have continued. Just to give you a few examples.
Well, let's get one example and then get to a couple of questions from listeners. So, as an example.
Well, yes. So as an example, last year when Pakistan and the people there were, suffering from the massive flooding, the IMF required the government to end energy subsidies so that people who had access to energy during that time, it was cut off. And they were to essentially increase regressive sales taxes, and also, what they were doing with the policies in Pakistan is it increased taxes on fuel and electricity when people needed access to it most. And then, in Burundi, Jamaica, Ukraine, Togo, what we saw is that wages were frozen and public laborers were laid off as a result of IMF policies and conditions with loans.
Mm-hmm.